On this Tuesday installment of Locked On Texans, Brandon K. Scott from Sports Radio 610 stops by to talk about whether or not it is time to be concerned about Dameon Pierce, John Metchie, and he actually has one position group that we haven't really had an opportunity to dive into, but we're going to let B. Scott do that.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers, Texan fans across the great nation, to this Tuesday episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you to all of our first-time listeners and viewers. Please do us a favor. Subscribe, like, and comment to the Locked On Texans podcast on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. Shout out to our everydayers from the Himalayas coming back to listen to Cody and myself talk Texans. I'm your Texans football analyst, John, some sports guy Hickman. On the other side of the screen, Texans credential media member, Cody Davis. And I know you guys see Brandon K. Scott, but we will have him join the show a little later. Before we get started.
I got some magic. Watch this.
Ta-da! Magic. Voila, magic. Before we get started, I want to say, man, we got the kids back at school. School is kicking back up. So if we got any teachers, parents, getting these kids ready to school while you're heading to work. If you're listening to us, man, you guys have a great, blessed day. And Cody, before it's all said and done, I would love to shotgun a couple of beers with Cal McNair, owner of the Houston Texans, because I think we would have a good time. Over the weekend,
he gonna do it. Put it like this: February 2025, NOLA. That sounds like a perfect opportunity.
I hope Cal hears this.
That sounds like a perfect opportunity. NOLA 2025. That's all I'm saying. Look, that's all I'm saying.
If the Texans make it there, that's right down the street. He may be shotgunning beers on the way to New Orleans, because I ain't gotta fly. I ain't gotta waste my plane. I can get chartered there on the team bus. I want a shotgun with the players. But what I will say, you never know who's listening to this podcast. I didn't know Cal knew me. He gave me like one of what's up, and I was like, man, Cal know me. What's up, Cal? So Cal, if you see me again, baby, I'm a Michelob Ultra guy. But whatever you drinking, if it's Natty Ice, if it's Heineken, don't matter. I'm going to shotgun a beer with Cal one day. I'm going to say that right. I'm going to claim it. But we got to talk Texans. Cody, take us away.
Yes, sir. And on this Tuesday installment of Locked On Texans, of course, we're going to be joined by Brandon K. Scott to get his thought on roughly the first month of Houston Texans training camp. There is a position group that me and John always want to talk about, but other things always get in the way. So we kind of always just kind of look over it. But finally, we had an opportunity to dive into that position group with B. Scott. You guys are going to hear that at the close of the show. And of course, look, the biggest storyline on the offensive side of the ball is John Metchie, Dameon Pierce. Are they going to have that resurgence, or will they not? So we're going to get into that a little bit later on in the show. But first, John, the Houston Texans held their latest day of training camp. And look, it was actually a good day due to players coming back to the practice field. Desmond King, Brevin Jordan, Joe Mixon, Laramie Tunsil all made their long-awaited return to the practice field. They look good. However, the one guy who also made his return to the practice field but did not practice too long was Christian Harris. John, one thing that let me just say this really quick.
Go ahead. Can I kick it? Yes, you can. Go ahead.
Being in the media business, man, I'm not gonna lie. I don't blame organizations and the coaching staff when we ask them a particular question and they don't really give you the full answer. And I get it, because at the end of the day, you're trying to make sure you don't show your cards too much. And I know some people get irritated about that, but I don't, because I'm like, okay, I get it. I understand.
You gotta protect your players in the franchise.
You gotta protect your players, gotta protect your franchise, and even more so now because look, we started off this show, hinting at the fact that whether or not they can make it to New Orleans next year. So I get all of that, but at some point, I feel you have to be honest and say, this is what's going on with X, Y, and Z. And the reason why I said it is because I go back to the very first day of training camp. We asked Coach D'Amico Ryans, hey, Christian Harris is not out there, anything going on with him. And he made us feel like, it's nothing to be concerned about. Hey, at the end of the day, Harris, Tunsil, and all the rest of these players, they're going to be ready come week 1 of the regular season. Okay, fair enough. However, Christian Harris takes the field for the very first time in training camp, does minor work, and then he leaves early due to another. I can't say another. I don't know if it's another or the same injury, but John, I just go back to something that I said last week. It has to be a soft tissue injury that he's dealing with, and I'm hoping that what we saw was not gearing up for a quote unquote setback.
I hope not as well, because shout out to Big Sarge. Had a one-on-one interview with rookie Kalen Bullock. But to speak towards Christian Harris, I hope it's not another setback, but it does feel like it is now.
Mm-hmm.
It does feel like a cause for concern. It's Friday's game. After I watched that game and I'm going back to rewatch it, I came away from that game thinking to myself, I can only judge this team in its totality halfway, because we ain't seen all of the best players out there. Well, Monday rolls around. Joe Mixon, who's been out, he's back at practice suited up. Larry Tunsil's back at practice suited up. Those were two players. When you look at the running back position, the arguments on whether or not Dameon Pierce is RB2, RB3, or even make this team, will he be traded? Well, we got Joe Mixon back at practice. Blake Fisher getting the reps that he's getting. We got Larry Tunsil back at practice. And we talked about how bad the offensive line played when Dameon Pierce got his carries. Then, all of a sudden, Larry Tunsil's back. Your best player on the offensive line, you got Dameon Pierce breaking off 2 big runs at practice behind Larry Tunsil on the left side. So you get the best players back. That allows other players to be productive. Christian Harris has been highly regarded as one of the better players on the defensive side of the ball, especially considering how he ended off last season. We have yet to see that, because we have yet to see him. And at first, it was not a concern of mine. And I was thinking, man, he's going into his 3rd year. I think this is still a pivotal time for him. It's not like he's a half a decade in type of vet. He still needs to learn, but I wasn't necessarily concerned. But after showing up to practice, after not practicing at all, not playing at all, and then leaving before practice can end, that's when it started to click to me. No, I think we should be concerned. And the concern for me is something I mentioned about 2 months ago, give or take a couple of weeks. After you get past Azeez, Christian Harris, and I'm going to throw Henry T into that mix simply because this is his 2nd year in this defense, in this scheme, playing under D'Amico and Matt Burke. Once you get past those 3 linebackers, that group is very thin and the talent is extremely scarce. And so for me, guys, it's like I'm not overreacting, because as you guys can see, we're going to talk about, can this be the league's best defense? I think top 5 to top 7. They finished 11th last year. That is very doable for this team. But you're going to need your best players to do that. And now you're looking at a defense that won't have Danico Autry for the first 6 games. Okay, that's fine. Folu Fadakowski and Mario Everest played some damn good football against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Khalil Davis played some damn good football against the Pittsburgh Steelers for the Texans. But how long will Harris be out? And if we have a timetable, I'm less concerned, because we don't have a timetable. We don't know what's going on with Christian Harris. We are in la-la land in regards to Christian Harris. And so with that being said, when I look at the D tackle position, I'm seeing guys perform. When I look at the linebacker position, aside from Henry T, and I've seen growth from him, none of those other linebackers really stood out to me outside of Delshon Phillips. And I think he's a guy fighting for a roster spot. So, yes, I think it is time to be concerned, because we have yet to see one of Houston's best players on the defensive side of the ball.
Talk about one of Houston's best players. Now we're going to talk to one of Houston's best journalists, Mr. Brandon K. Scott from Sports Radio 610, coming up on the opposite side of the break.
Passion, drive, and patience. That's the winning formula for being able to win championships. That's also the winning formula to be able to produce 5 shows a week and cover the Houston Texans. It's also what keeps your number one ride or die alive. That's your vehicle. That's your car. We love our cars here in America. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. What you want? Superchargers? You need a roof rack? Some exhaust kits? LED headlights, whatever you need, eBay Motors has you covered. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, they got it all. With over 122 million parts, come on, guys. With over 122 million parts, they got it all for you. For your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guarantee Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guarantee Fit only available to U.S. customers.
Welcome back in, ladies and gentlemen, to this Tuesday installment of Locked On Texans. And as promised, we got our guy, Mr. Brandon K. Scott from Sports Radio 610. Brandon, what's going on, man?
Man, I'm just glad to be back here in the Locked On Texans group, man. I ain't seen y'all in a minute, man. I ain't know if I had been traded, if y'all had traded in the racial draft, or if somebody adopted me in the family, in a different family, or what happened, man. I was trying to figure out if I was still a part of the caucus or not.
Well, I'll tell you what, you was not traded in the racial draft. That was not going to happen. We would have to get a first-round pick for the next 4 years for that to happen.
Only so many other places I could go, man. I think I'm pretty limited. Not
that the Olympics are over.
Not a lot of versatility here, bro. Straight up.
B. Scott, we glad to have you back, man. And the last time we spoke to you, man, it was a lot of, hype surrounding Dameon Pierce and, the potential resurgence that he could have. And look, the first couple of weeks of training camp, we all was on the same train of having that resurgence, especially when you consider that the running back group was basically made up. However, before they started training camp, me and John was like, look, the running back position is definitely a position group that you should keep your eyes on. Now they added Cam Akers. Not gonna lie, wasn't expecting much from Cam Akers, but through the first 2 preseason games, this young man, 30 yards on 11 carries, 42 receiving yards on 5 catches. Your breakdown of this running back group, how do you see it being played out? And what is your thoughts about Dameon Pierce as of right now?
Well, just based off of right now, Cody, man, it's Cam Akers is running back number 2 for me right now. Like, if we were just talking about how is the competition going based off of right now, if you take all of the context and all of the history out, like, hey, forget about Dameon Pierce's rookie year and all of the resurgence talk that you just talked about. Forget about Cam Akers coming off of back-to-back Achilles tears and everything that we know about that. Just take it all in a vacuum. What you've seen from the running back room between training camp and these first 2 preseason games, I don't know how you wouldn't objectively say that Cam Akers is not, if not running back number 2, at least in the running forward. And I don't know if Dameon Pierce is even, this is the disappointing part about it. I'm not sure, even though we know he's higher in the depth chart, I'm not sure he's done enough to even differentiate himself from Darian Gumbawale on the depth, just based off of production. Now, we all know he's got more skills, that he's got more upside than that, but just based off of what we've seen, he is certainly behind Cam Akers for me, and I think you could even make an argument that he's not even ahead of Darian Gumbawale, which is the disappointing part because you would expect him to be there. Now, I don't think it's all Dameon Pierce's fault. I do want to point that out. I think he was dealing with some line issues, some offensive line issues, to a major degree, I would say, dealing with some major offensive line issues. But that's also part of the problem. You would like for it to be like, I remember in Dameon Pierce's rookie year where he was able to take spotty offensive line play and still make something happen out of it. Now, that was a different scheme, a different offensive coordinator, different offense entirely. I understand that. But I remember that guy from a couple of years ago, and I'm not seeing that. Like to be able to perform in spite of your offensive line. I know it's a lot to ask of a running back, but you see it happen. You see Cam Akers make guys miss. We understand that Joe Mixon is a kind of do-it-all running back, but Dameon Pierce, part of the charm is he can make you miss. He'd run through you. He can make the most out of little, and he hasn't been that. 4 yards on 4 carries is not going to get it done. Do I think it means he's cooked? Do I think it means he shouldn't make the team? No. But has he performed up to standard up until this point? I would say no.
I want to rebuttal that just a little bit because I do think for players like Dameon Pierce and John Metchie, which I believe we're going to get into, it's all about making the most of your opportunities. A Cam Akers can afford to go 4 for 4 simply because the expectations for Cam were extremely low when he was signed here. I think everybody looked at Cam Akers as a camp body coming in to compete. He came in right when Joe Mixon went out. Or if I look at the wide receiver room and John Metchie, the expectations for Nico Tank and Stephon are so high that they're solidified on this roster. When you get those opportunities, when the ball is in the air, when the ball is handed off to you, you are expected to make the most out of those opportunities. And I've been trying to find, especially with John Metchie, what has he been able to do, or Dameon Pierce, in spite of. But to Dameon Pierce's point, at practice on Monday, I'm seeing all the reports. Laremy Tunsil is back at practice, and Dameon Pierce busts off 2 big runs behind Laremy Tunsil in their left side. They didn't give him an opportunity to run behind the better side of that line in Friday's game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Ran behind Chris Reed, and that was terrible. Nick Broker, that was terrible. So what I want to ask you is, when you look at those opportunities that Dameon's getting, and when you look at the circumstance, is it fair to say that spot is still up for grabs whenever Dameon can get an opportunity to play behind the starting offensive line? Or is he in a position to where, if I'm a coach, I'm going to view you for what you've done in that moment, and in that moment you've been disappointed?
Yeah, see, I appreciate you trying to provide the context, John, but this is the other side of that, of what you're saying, and we all got to acknowledge this. He didn't have no more or less opportunity than the next guy. Like, give me the offensive line that anybody else that was better. Give me the better offensive line that somebody else ran behind. You know what I'm saying?
But 11 carries compared to 4.
No, I understand, but it also makes me wonder, like, how much can we just attribute it to the offense? Like, you can go play by play and break it down. Hey, this is the offensive line's fault. Here's something that he actually missed. We can do that. But when you take it in its totality, it's like, hey, man, we're going to run out of excuses eventually. Last year was a new scheme. Right now in the preseason, it's the offensive line. Like, at what point is it going to be, hey, man, we just need you to go? Like, did he have any greater excuse than his rookie year, that team that he played on then? You know what I mean? Like, and look, I understand that offensive line maybe played up better than his potential, and maybe that scheme suited him better. But my thought is, like, at some point, the rubber going to meet the road. Now, I want to reiterate, it does not mean that I think that he's cooked or that he's not going to be good at any point. It just has not been good enough yet. I do, to your point, John, I do want to see what it looks like when the entire cast is there. So, like, I think any talk of, hey, him not making the team or anything like that is ridiculous. But could he get his spot on the depth chart? Like, could he go from RB2 to RB3 like that? If Cam Akers looks like he's better, like he's making more of the opportunities, I could absolutely see that. I could absolutely see that based off of what we've seen so far. Now, I do want to see him get those opportunities in a real game with real offensive linemen out there. But at some point, the rubber gonna meet the road.
Yeah. B. Scott, along those same lines, how does this kind of compare to your feelings about John Metchie? And I want to say this real quick. I know the last 3 days we talked a lot about John Metchie and Dameon Pierce, but look, that's basically been the biggest storyline when you take a look at the Houston Texans on the offensive side of the ball. But B. Scott, how do you see this John Metchie situation playing out? Because just like Dameon Pierce, start of training camp, it looked like it was going to be a resurgence. He looked damn good through those first 2 weeks of training camp. Kind of took a little dip after he went out with like a minor injury for those 2 days. But since he came back, he hasn't really looked the same. 2 preseason games and, really haven't had that much of an opportunity. Me and John talk about it from time to time on this show, maybe it's because he's playing, with Davis Mills. Maybe it's because, in training camp, he's playing alongside Case Keenum. He hasn't had any real legitimate snaps with CJ Stroud. Is that going into play? However, whether fair or unfair, as of right now, with the season start tomorrow, it's hard for me. I've always been a John Metchie fan, but it's hard for me to say I can see him definitely being one of the 6 or one of the 7 or one of the 8 wide receivers that the Houston Texans will ride with.
Yeah, man, I'm trying to reckon with the way they talk about John Metchie and what our opinion of John Metchie is, or the way we root for him. I'm trying to reckon that with what we actually see on the field, because there is a disconnect, and it's awkward, and I hate to acknowledge it, but there is a disconnect between the rooting interest in John Metchie. Obviously, it's an incredible story, and then and of course we remember how he played at Alabama. Like we understand why he was a second-round pick to begin with, so we know that potential is somewhere in there. So like those feelings versus what we're actually seeing out there, and it's not to say that what we're seeing out there is bad or terrible, because I don't think he's been bad. I just think that he's been like woefully unremarkable. Like it's been like just not standing out really at all. Like it just kind of looks like a guy out there, just like another dude. Like if you didn't know, again, remember what I said earlier about take the context out of it, take the storylines out of it, strip him of his name and all of that. Like just, hey, who's that? Like when you see him, he does not stand out. He does not make you wonder, hey, who's that, right? Who's number 8? Like you're not doing that when you see him out there. He's not, I don't think, glaringly bad again, but you want a second-round pick to stand out. You want to get something similar to the John Metchie that they drafted, the John Metchie that played at Alabama. Now, we understand he's been through a lot since then, but it doesn't really look like those things are connecting, and that's the thing that I'm struggling with. I was telling you this before the show, Cody. I have a hard time viewing him as one of the top 6 to 8 wide receivers based off of what we've seen so far. Now, that's difficult to say because I feel like he is one of the top 6 to 8 talented guys. But at some point, remember I said the rubber got to meet the road? Like that's got to translate eventually. And it has not. That part of it has been disappointing. So I'm obviously still rooting for John Metchie, and I still think that there's a lot there, but you got to see it in the game. Like I said a couple of weeks ago on the radio that I'm starting to be concerned with whether he's a practice player at this point, like somebody that stands out at practice and in workouts. and I don't even mean that as an insult, like not at all. Like, and I'm a big fan, just like you are, Cody, a big fan of John Metchie. But it does make me wonder if, like, and I've seen teams like this on various levels where the best player in practice and the best player in the game don't be the same dude. Like I've seen that. Different sports, different levels, it's a thing. And so I started wondering about, like, man, I wonder if John Metchie is just dealing with something that is not allowing whatever he's doing in practice and in the offseason to not translate into the games. But let me tell you this is what worried me. It was not even this last game that worried me. It was that Hall of Fame game against the Bears where, and it wasn't even his performance per se. It was, again, the fact that when it seemed like it was time to target a guy, like I went into that game thinking that John Metchie would be wide receiver number 1, if not wide receiver number 2, something like that. And it felt like when it was time to target guys, when it was time to make a play, it was Xavier Hutchinson, it was a tight end, it was somebody. Point being, it was somebody else. Yeah. And that stood out to me in that game. And there was nothing that's happened since then that's made me feel differently or more comfortable with that fact or with that thing that I saw of him just not being a focal point in what they were trying to do. And then again, like I mentioned before, he has been disappointingly unremarkable out there. And so I'm hoping it picks up for him because, like Dameon Pierce, maybe even more so to a large degree because of his story, he's somebody I'm absolutely rooting for.
We're going to go ahead and switch up, head to the defensive side of the ball. Brandon Scott, can this be the NFL's best defense in the NFL? Y'all don't want to go nowhere. We got more Locked On Texans on the other side of the timeout. Right now, for all of my small business owners out there in the world, you need somebody to fill roles. You need somebody to fill jobs. And when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has all of the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. That's 1 day worth of work. You can hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is also constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That is linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. So, can this team defense, K. Scott, that's what I like to call him, it's my brother, be the league's top defense in the NFL? And let's be realistic. Out of 32 teams, it's kind of hard to say a team will be number one that hasn't been number one in a decade. But can we put this team, based off what we've seen, in the top 5 discussion?
Yeah, I was going to say top defense is going to be like that'll be me really drinking a lot of Kool-Aid, way more sugar than
what's in that Kool-Aid?
I was going to say.
What's in
that? More than sugar if I go that far, right? Definitely more than sugar. But I will say top 5 does not feel like too hot taking. It feels like a realistic. And I want to say I've done this segment too on the radio at some point of, hey, I'm starting to get the top 5 type of defense sort of vibes from this squad. And it's based on them having a star at every level. I think they got a star on the defensive line. I think they got 2 stars on the defensive line on the edge. They got a star at linebacker if he can stay on the field in Christian Harris, and a really, really reliable veteran in Azeez Al-Shaair, someone who's a veteran and a leader and somebody just knows what to do, especially within the scheme that they're going to be running, playing under DeMeco Ryans. I think that part of it is important. Azeez Al-Shaair is a good football player. I think he's an even better football player under DeMeco Ryans. So I want to point that out. I like the linebacker room if it's healthy, really at the top end. Okay, we'll come back to that. And then, of course, the secondary, obviously Derek Stingley Jr., star. Kamari Lassiter, put a pin in that, could be a star to make it. Already somebody that they trust enough to be a starter as a rookie, competing against veterans who I think, while disappointing in their draft slot, are legitimate veterans who have started a lot of football games in the NFL. So that matters and I think means something. The safety position I think is interesting and kind of a wild card, but I honestly feel comfortable if Jimmy Ward is healthy and Kalen Bullock was my favorite draft pick that they made. So I still feel that way. So I'm good with that. I like the defense. My issue with it overall is the depth. Like I've been saying that for a little while too. It's like, and this really stood out to me in that first game, John. I'm gonna tell you, man, that Hall of Fame game, and then this last one again, it was reinforced again in this last game against the Steelers. When them starters not out there, when them stars that I just mentioned that I like so much are not out there, I don't like this defense as much. I don't like it nearly as much. Now I'm not. That's not breaking news. I'm not revealing anything. Hey, starters are better than backups. Dun breaking news. I get it. But like it was drastic, a drastic feeling in my level of comfort with the stars and with the guys that are supposed to be out there versus the guys that we've been watching by and large in the preseason.
What's the most concerning position?
Linebacker depth.
Thank you. And that's what I was going to ask you.
I love it.
You know,
I don't love it. Let me get it. I don't love it.
I love it. I love it
real.
because I was going to ask you about that because we've talked a lot about, safety and cornerback, but B. Scott, why is linebacker, your most concerning position right now?
Man, they got dudes at linebacker that I like a lot, but like as in, hey, let's go get a drink. Hey, I like that special teams play. I like that tackle on special teams. Hey, let me check y'all out on this new kickoff. I want to see what y'all boys are going to do on that. You know, I'm talking about the Neville Hewitts of the world. I'm talking about the Jake Hansons of the world. I'm talking about the depth that they do have at the position. I like, but not at the position, if that makes sense. Like, I like those dudes in the roles that they have them in or had them in. Like, but when they got to step up and really play some more snaps at linebacker, I think that's a little bit of a concern when you're talking about, at least when you're talking about a defense that wants to be the best in the league or the top 5 or whatever type of conversation we're having right now. Like, we're not talking about 2022 Texans, or, you know what I'm saying? We're not talking about 2021 Texans. We're talking about this year's team. Nah, I don't love that depth. I mean, think about it. After I mentioned Azeez Al-Shaair and Christian Harris, like, who are the linebackers that you can confidently say can go out there and make plays for you? Can either, like, in either facet, like, you like them against the pass or the run. Like, they're either maybe good at one and not good at the other. Like, you don't really have a lot there. And I think that's an issue with Christian Harris's injury. I don't know what's going on with that. Like, if he's not healthy, I'm sounding the alarm, because they don't have anybody to replicate that. Like, not even close, I don't think. And so if that's an issue, to me, you're basically an injury away in that position room, an injury away, and a very specific injury away, Azeez Al-Shaair or Christian Harris, to, like, looking at the next guy like, man, there's a serious enough drop off.
You know, I tweeted that yesterday. I said, listen, man, the Christian Harris news, you know, is starting to concern me. And I got relax, or it's one game, don't worry, that's overreaction. And I'm like, I think for me, when I saw some of those other guys, I'm looking at Neville Hewitt, a career special teamer. I'm looking at him against the Pittsburgh Steelers, just missed tackles. Right. We talked about Damian Pierce and John Metchie not making the most of their opportunities. I think Neville Hewitt is also in that box. I thought Henry T was much better in coverage against the Pittsburgh Steelers. That was one play. I believe it was a play action. We recognized it and was able to get an eye in the zone on Pickens, I believe. So to take that away from Justin Fields. So I did like that. I liked what I saw out of Delshon Phillips, but Delshon Phillips is a guy that I think is fighting for a roster spot. I may like him. I may like what he can bring. I think he was one of the big reasons why Houston was able to get a sack on one of those plays. I think the second sack of the game. I like what Henry T was doing. The growth of him has been good to watch on the practice field and in the game. But the fact of the matter is, when you have the high expectations this team has, you got to make sure that at every level, at every position, the next man up can actually play. And I absolutely agree with you. If Harris goes down, and it's concerning that he hasn't had a full day of practice yet, return Monday, left Monday. If Azeez go down, then I do look at that position like a very thin position in terms of talent, not body, but talent, and it starts to worry me. The good thing about it is, and I want to transition, the D-line is just that good to kind of help out those guys at the second level. And I was impressed by Mario Edwards in the job that he did, Folu Fadukow's in the job that he did. Me and Cody's favorite guy here, Khalil Davis. The job that D tackle unit did with Will Anderson with Daniil Hunt on the outside, I thought those guys really dominated up front, and that did help the linebackers flow in and out of zones and stuff like that. So can we talk about the D-line spot?
Yeah, so I think that maybe that's your saving grace. Like, when you talk about, like, maybe you don't need a Christian Harris level linebacker. That now in coverage, this is going to be an issue.
You need it. You're going to need it.
But like, it's just kind of in general terms here. Maybe because of the disruption that you're getting up front, and there, hear the cliche, everything starts up front, especially with this defense, attack, swarm, all of that. Okay, well, if they handling business up front, then you like to think that all you got to do is really just do your job. You don't have to be remarkable behind them. Just do your job as the linebackers, and everything will work out. That doesn't, like, that is glass half full talk, though. Like, you still need dudes out there. And like, I like the D-line. I'll admit this. I was wrong about that D-line. Like, I was worried about it coming in, because I'm like, man, what are we doing on the inside? What's going on? Turns out Mario Edwards is a dude. And when I talked to Will Anderson about this early on in camp, asked him about, man, who do you like watching out there the most? Who are you a fan of when you're out there? And he just shouted out Mario Edwards. And I was like, man, that might be the one dude he might be the most important dude that we never mentioned in the offseason until that moment. And when I say we, I'm talking about us on that radio station, us on that radio program. We had not really mentioned him maybe once or twice, if that, until that moment. We talked about him a lot since then, of course. But leading up to that moment, it had been very little of that. And so I'm pleased with that. Foley Fatukasi, as you mentioned, John, right there with you. I think the depth, honestly, and Nick Caserio talked about this, because I asked him about it on the first day of training camp. Like, they've got a little bit more depth at that position. Khalil Davis, y'all mentioned. They got more depth at that position than I think any of us realized, and maybe even they realized. But to me, the linebacking core is still an issue. Like, kudos to them for knowing what they was doing and being better at scouting defensive linemen than the rest of us. Because I was curious. I was not as much worried as much as I was curious and confused. Because I'm like, man, what's going on here? But I see it now. I see the vision. Don't quite see the vision if Christian Harris is not healthy. If something happens to Azeez Al-Shaair, I think they feel comfortable with Henry To'oTo'o as a second-year guy. That's kind of a natural Mike linebacker. But I do still feel like that's a drop-off to a large degree. Otherwise, I don't think they would have pursued Shaair the way that they did and given him the money that they did. So if they had more confidence in Henry To'oTo'o being that heir apparent or anything like that. So I like Henry To'oTo'o as a backup, but obviously you don't want to go to your backups. The defensive line, especially those interior guys, you can throw anybody out there. I'll be good with it. They all seem to be like dogs to me.
What I want to say is the comparison between the two defensive lines in terms of Malik Collins and Sheldon Rankins to this year, what I saw in that preseason game, and I'm going to give it over to Cody after this, what I saw in that preseason game is I think this interior D-line does a better job in commanding and taking on double teams compared to Malik Collins and Sheldon Rankins, who they closed out very good for Houston. They were more of, I'm getting after the quarterback type of disruptors. And I think at times that left an unbalanced D-line as to where these two guys, Mario Edwards and especially Fatukasi and Khalil Davis, they do a good job of just taking on those double teams and splitting them and beating them and allowing linebackers to flow in and out. That's a
good football point, John. I'm gonna make an even more basic point that I think falls in line with it though. Them boys just bigger. Them bigger boys. Like, there's no diss to Malik Collins or to Sheldon Rankins, but Fatukasi and Mario Edwards, that is a more massive pairing.
I trust Fatukasi's brisket if he said I got a barbecue tonight, I want the media member to come on out to meet the family.
We will be there.
I would be there, and I wouldn't have any reservations about his brisket because I look at his arm.
Yeah.
And
we riding together.
Listen.
We
and I know
now.
when you beat Scott from Herman Clark, I just gonna swing through after I go see my grandmother.
We riding out.
We going to Foley's house.
We riding out.
That's a big dude, man.
Straight up.
Oh my God, Brandon K. Scott from Sports Radio 610. Brandon, really quick, where can our listeners follow you at on all your social media platforms, and what can they read your work? Because I think you writing for about 4 or 5 different websites now. Please be sure to tell everybody where they can follow all of your work.
For now, man, just at Brandon K. Scott on Twitter and at B. Scott from Hiram Clark on Instagram. Of course, Sports Radio 610. I do a little work for the Houston Chronicle. I do a little bit of this and that. But follow those social media channels and y'all know what's going on.
And as always, I'm your host, Cody M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at Cody Davis _24. Once again, that's Cody, COTY DAVIS _24.
John Hickman, some sports guy. If you're nasty, I guess. Follow me on Twitter.
Whoa, hey, yo.
I don't know why I said that. But follow me on Twitter at John _Hickman12. You guys make sure you subscribe, like, and comment to the Locked On Texans podcast on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast as well. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.